It's official. The CUSMA renegotiation begins. The United States have opened up consultations on this all-important trade agreement for Canadians to help break it all down. I'm joined by Sean Speer, my co-founder and editor-at-large. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Rudyard. Great talking to you.
So, level set for us here. What does this mean? The Americans have started consultations as part of the formal process, I guess, entrenched in the original agreement, Sean, about what happens next. And I guess to the credit of the Americans so far, they seem to be following a process.
That's precisely right. Listeners and viewers will know that we currently have a free trade agreement with the United States and Mexico. For the past several months, the Carney government has been aiming to negotiate something that extends beyond the free trade agreement, what the prime minister called an economic and security agreement. Those efforts seem to have come to an abrupt end, and we are now relying on our access to the U.S. market through the pre-existing free trade agreement, which, amongst other things, as you say, Rudyard, has specific provisions set out for a review process that is set to launch on earnest on July 1st, 2026. The announcement today from the U.S. administration that it's launching consultations, including hearings in November, essentially sets that process in motion. So take a deep breath. It's going to be a pretty big next 6 to 12 months for Canada to learn ultimately what type of access we'll have to the U.S. market moving forward.
Some interesting words out today by Pete Hoekstra, the U.S. ambassador, that gives us a little clue, Sean, potentially, A, why we're at this point now of consultations being renegotiation, beginning of CUSMA. Walk us through that, because it suggests that maybe there was a kind of bigger deal possibly on the table after the federal election in Canada. But according to the U.S. ambassador, Canadians, Prime Minister Carney, for whatever reasons, and we'll have some fun speculating, weren't willing to engage.
Yeah, Canada-U.S. bilateral trade totals something like $1 trillion a year, Rudyard. And so I think the $1 trillion question that is on the minds of a lot of people is what the heck happened? In March, the prime minister talked about uh, launching into economic negotiations over an economic and security agreement as his top priority as prime minister. The U.S. ambassador says that's something that the administration was actually keen on, that it saw potential for an agreement that went beyond just tariffs and also addressed issues around defense and security and broader integration. And as the Globe and Mail story puts it, quote, recently the prime minister has talked in smaller terms of negotiating tariff deals with the U.S. in key sectors and renegotiating USMCA. The plan has changed, and yet, Roger, there hasn't been really, to my knowledge, any scrutiny of what happened, who's responsible for those talks breaking down, and what it means moving forward. As I say, I think that ought to be the $1 trillion question for those in the parliamentary press gallery.
Yeah, as I say, Sean, the past is prologue, and it suggests that maybe there was a deal on the table, but probably, Sean, that deal would have led to much deeper integration between Canada and the United States. I'm sure that the Americans, would be happy to have a grand bargain if, say, it ended supply management. It opened up different sectors of our economy, from banking to telcos to airlines. Who knows if it rolled back not just the digital services tax, but a lot of the big tech regulation and legislation that the Trudeau government had put in place. So, Sean, to bring this forward to the CUSMA, what do you think that suggests? I mean, I would think that those American interests, the things that they'd like to take up in a future negotiation, haven't gone away. And just because our
Yes.
prime minister and government, maybe for legitimate reasons, political or otherwise, set aside a grand bargain, I don't think the Americans or President Trump have said no to any of those things, probably that they were asking, the day after the federal election.
Yeah, I'll address that directly in a moment, but let me just emphasize how problematic I think it is, Roger, that we're left speculating with what happened. This is arguably the most important issue facing the country. It certainly was the top issue in the minds of voters when they went to the polls in April. And the fact that these negotiations have broken down a economic and security partnership has been put on the shelf, and we're left speculating what happened or what the trade-offs might have been. Just strikes me as a really real failure on the part of the news media in Ottawa to put those questions to the prime minister and his ministers, and a failure on the part of the government to communicate to Canadians on what is an essential issue. But to directly address your question, I think that's precisely right. If the approach that the administration has taken with other countries is any indication, this won't be so much a negotiation as it will be the submission of a series of grievances or objections to Canadian policy from the U.S. administration, and the Canadian government will have to decide how many of those, possibly all of them, it's prepared to compromise on in order to maintain something like mostly tariff-free access to the U.S. market. I say mostly tariff-free because in the same article, Hoekstra puts on the table that even within a new USMCA, there may be certain sectors or certain exports that remain subject to, if
100%.
not a tariff on the first export, then possibly an escalating tariff as
Yeah.
exports increase. So this is a really difficult, will be a really difficult negotiation for any government, including the Carney one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's hope this time the communication is a little bit clearer because I think we can all see where this is headed. We're Humpty Dumpty is not being put back together
Yes.
again. Whatever CUSMA 2.0 agreement we land on, I'm sure is going to have sectoral tariffs. It may even have some kind of universal revenue raising tariff for the U.S. government. Obviously, lots can happen between now and then. We have an important Supreme Court ruling on some of the president's tariff power. So we'll have to see where that lands. But I want to pick up what you just mentioned, again, the U.S. ambassador talking about autos, because he was quite precise in a way that I think, again, shows this kind of intense quid quo pro that the Americans are bringing to any renegotiation of Canada about anything. And in this case, it was the auto sector. The ambassador effectively said that if Canada is bringing in 400,000 cars from the United States, I'm sure those probably are trucks and other things that Canadians are buying American-made cars, then Canada should be sending to the United States an equivalent number of trucks and cars, 400,000. If you look at the numbers now, Canada's sending a lot more than 400,000 trucks and cars from our plants to the U.S., probably closer to 800,000 in a good year. So that suggests, Sean, that under the ambassador's reading, and again, under this more kind of Trumpian view that 1 + 1 = 2. And if you get X, I get Y, and those two have to be really, really close to each other. That means effectively that the Ontario auto industry would be 40 to 50% smaller than it is today.
Yes, the ambassador himself, who in a previous life was a congressman in the state of Michigan, essentially concedes that part of the motivation here is to shift some of that production from Canada to the U.S. as a way to essentially equalize two-way trade in the auto sector. As we've been talking about from day one, I think it's crucial to understand tariffs on the part of the administration as a means to an end, the end being a combination of revenues to offset the Trump administration's tax cuts, but also pulling production from Canada and other countries back into the U.S. And Hoekstra, in this particular exchange at the Canadian International Council, was more plain about that second
Mhm.
motivation than we've heard from others in the administration.
Yeah. My final comment here is just like there is no government bailout or program that's big enough to plug the hole in the Canadian auto industry if total Canadian auto exports fall by 40 to 50%. Because this is not only a systemic event for the manufacturers, it's a systemic event for all the suppliers around them here in Southern Ontario. And arguably, it would be a systemic event for the Ontario economy. So Sean, I don't know. Will we look back, and this is my final question, will we look back fondly, possibly, months from now on what might have happened months ago, which would have been some grand bargain? Are we, in a sense, going to end up, what's that expression, saving your face, despite your nose?
Yes.
I worry here that we may have pushed off the tougher political conversation that the Prime Minister would have had to have with Canadians about what a grand bargain with the Americans would require in terms of concessions, to now engage in a death by a thousand cuts, which for some industries like auto or lumber or steel or aluminum, could be mortally wounding to broad swaths of the Canadian economy.
Yeah, well said. In recent weeks, the Prime Minister has made the case that the USMCA provides Canadians with greater access to the U.S. market than virtually any others around the world. That's true, of course. The problem is it all depends on the USMCA. And that's why today's announcement of the launch of these consultations, combined with the ambassador's clues about the position of on the part of the administration in those negotiations, signals that even that ultimately, Rudyard, may not be the kind of solace that the Prime Minister thinks for Canadian businesses and Canadian workers.
Yeah, it certainly looks like it has an expiration date, and those
Yes.
lovely single-digit tariffs that are now in their totality being leveled on the Canadian economy, again, could be something in the rearview mirror sooner than we wish. Sean, thanks for coming on Hub Hits today and breaking it all down for us.
Yeah, great talking with you as always, Rudyard.
Listeners and viewers, thanks for watching. We'll do this again soon. Bye-bye. This video, in fact, all of our videos this month are being brought to you by Airbnb. We're just thrilled to have Airbnb as a sponsor of the Hub's YouTube channel. And, we've talked a lot on this channel about the housing crisis facing Canada. We know now that, some people think that short-term rentals are a big part of the problem and that they're taking supply off the market. That's not been our view at the Hub. We think that it doesn't, frankly, make a lot of sense. We support Airbnb's contention that the median number of nights an Airbnb hosting Canada has guests is 55. There's a full 300 left out there that Airbnb and others could be renting those homes for. So these rental properties are not full, and honest Canadians are trying to get by renting them to us. We think that's great. Statistics Canada has reported the amount of Airbnbs that could actually be converted into long-term homes is also only 0.6% of Canada's housing stock. Canada needs new solutions to tackle the whole of the housing market, not just 0.6%. We encourage you to go check out Airbnb's information on this topic at airbnb.ca/closer look. Until next time, bye-bye.